You're listening to Adventure Party for the first week of September 2022. This week, the twin thespians play act their way into the original DMG's sample dungeon. Be careful, there's doors down there. The Adventure Party, discussing tabletop and radio gaming the Irish way. Look, it clearly says Devil's Bit on the side of the can. That means it's made out of devils, right? So it's perfectly fine for me to drink this.
At least yours in English. I've got something from Lithuania here that has, I think it's it's like a Maui mask with an angel kind of vibe. Oh, and there's two snakes wearing crowns, clinking beers over a casket. That's okay. Now there's a litre of it, and I'm going to drink it anyways.
Okay, well, we got to get through this all somehow. Welcome. We are, once again, as you can tell from our blood-soaked trophy room, we are once again discussing the Tomes of Gygax, the original Dungeon Master's Guide, 1979, and the wisdom and madness that lays therein.
79, that's the year of my birth.
Well, that's aging you.
I suspect this beer was born within the last few months. Back for the Tome of Gygax. We are... and the blood sort of thing, I don't know. The smell goes away after a while, I guess. You just get used to it.
Yeah.
It's all good.
That's why we have to get all this juice of Demon's cider to...
I'm not sure which I'm going to treat with more trepidation. This bottle of alcohol or this next chapter. What chapter are we up to?
We are on page 94... and we're heading into a sample dungeon, whereupon Gygax is going to demonstrate to him what he expects the average dungeon-going experience to be. And...
with a legend and a map. Well, we're going to talk about the map in a second. I've got literary references to make regarding the map. I have a doctor's note for this beer. Canapinus, I think. I'm sure that's how that's pronounced.
Not sure we're not allowed to talk about that on a family-friendly podcast.
We haven't been family-friendly for a while. You brought the whole blood-soaked thing into it. Okay, it's malty. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, but anyway, I do want to pause a second before we have your excoriation of the map. I do want to go back to the legend here, because this legend is one of those things that you don't realize is formative until you actually read it, because this is sort of setting down, and possibly it's based on their original shorthand for map drawing. But yeah, these legends and legends like it, showing what the difference between a stairs up and a stairs down is, how you tell a door, the fact that you put an S or through a wall if it's actually a secret door, or a C through it if it's actually a concealed door. This is all stuff that you see in basically every TSR adventure module and most of the Dungeon Magazine adventures, but it's one of those things that never gets explained and you sort of have to learn through osmosis. And it's possible this is the officialization of that method of map drawing and marking of things is right here.
Yeah, I encountered a lot of this in the HeroQuest maps that would have followed on from my introduction to...
HeroQuest was 85? 84? So about 5 years after this, I think.
Yeah, I suppose I got second edition HeroQuest or something. But yeah, the S for secret door, stairs up, stairs down, that kind of thing. All standardized at that point and as readable today as the day it was printed.
Which is not 100%, but you learn through punishment, I suppose.
Pretty much. I'm glad we've gone away from diagonal corridors. So let's... so we've got that. It launches straight into... it just says, a sample dungeon, here's the legend, and you might look at this and go, where the hell's the rest of this? And then wandering monster tables, and then it starts to describe the various rooms as numbered, which gets up to a grand total of what? About 39? Yeah, 39 rooms.
There's 39 rooms on the map, but only the first 3 are actually... I think the technical term is keyed.
Oh yeah, he just gets to number 4 and just goes, etc. There's a mic drop for you.
To be fair, it's probably meant to be aspirational. Although he doesn't explicitly say it, I assume the intent is that the DM can then extrapolate out the rest. Well, we'll get to why maybe the rest of the dungeon doesn't matter as much, but that's later.
Fair. Okay, page 95. Now, for those of you who have read the classic English novel Tristram Shandy, you'll find a cousin of that classic novel, which has the famous black page. You'll find it on page 95 of the first edition DMG, which is this big black square punctuated with rooms, which makes up the map, because we didn't have the innovation of hatching to indicate things like rock or walls back in the day. We just went with, let's just print flat, all-consuming black. Anyone who's ever worked in the print industry will know how much of a pain in the ass big flat fields of black are. They, especially back in the day when this would have been printed, because they're an absolute nightmare. Because the more black, the more ink you have on the page, the longer it takes to dry, the more chance it's going to warp and all sorts of other things, or just stick to other pages. So Mr. Gygax, when drafting this fundamentally black square to splodge into the middle of the book, as a big FU to his printers. But, perhaps unwittingly, a reference to one of the great idiosyncratic English novels. If you haven't read the Life and Death of Tristram Shandy, it's an interesting book. It's well worth a look. It's a lot of postmodernism there.
I almost suspect that he would have done this merely as a change from the TSR standard at the time, which I'm pretty sure was white background with bright blue features. So sort of a negative image of what we'd have here, where everything would be done out in blue, and you'd have to squint to differentiate it from the page behind it.
Why was that? Was it like an anti-photocopying thing, or?
I think it was, actually, yeah.
Yes. Well,
I think it was like they were trying to make it basically impossible to photocopy. Gygax had a bit of a skinflint streak that we know. And,
well, he was splashing out on the black on this one, so
yeah.
I hope he got a good deal. It's a. How would you describe this?
The whole dungeon or the example key?
This dungeon. Yeah, just in totality, how would you describe this thing?
It looks like your standard procedurally generated random dungeon where your random encounter table or random stocking tables in the back of the book could be, which 2 pages ago he told us never use that are in the back of the book. That they would get a good use, and you could fill this sort of stuff up with all kinds of horrible mazes, wandering monsters, not wandering monsters, and such. As a cohesive piece of work, I wouldn't necessarily say I'd want to live here with all of its random 90-degree angles in corridors for no reason, occasional 45-degree angle corridors just to mess with the mapper.
Yeah, it's a nightmare. The whole thing is just...
yeah, well, that's... Okay, so this is possibly something we haven't gone over before, but as we sort of guessed before, Gygax did like making the logistics of navigating the dungeon into part of the play challenge. Harder the process, the sweeter the victory, and he got very good very quickly, possibly because his players got very good very quickly at mapping the top levels of Classic Greyhawk, but Gygax very quickly mastered the process of making stuff hard to map so that people could make mistakes, because he believed this to be a virtuous thing, because then if it's possible to make mistakes, the people who don't make mistakes are better somehow.
Yeah.
His better players, as he might have said in the foreword. But I'm not sure it adds to the playability of the map itself.
I guess it makes for interesting tactical choices. I'll give it that much. Like, some of these places where you've got weird intersections of rooms and corridors, or there could be secret rooms that open into corridors, things like that. It's going to, and these are all, we've got to remember, these are all 10 feet across, or what was it? No, they're all one square. So one square is 7.5 feet, or something. No, it's less.
No, it says that the level key is one square equals 10 feet.
Oh, okay.
But the 10 feet is enough to have 3 people in it, as opposed to 2 in modern.
Fair enough. So these make for interesting places to have fights, at the very least. But would you ever lay out a place like this? No, it's madness. Mapping it, yeah. If all you have to go on are the instructions that you're given from your DM, your pencil, paper, and grid, then this is going to be something of a challenge. And quite tedious, probably. Not to mention there's no flow to it.
Yeah, like when we get to the example here, it is a very stop and start process that is described, and it's very...
Well, I'm looking at it and kind of parsing it out and going, actually, there's lots of bits of this dungeon that are only accessible from one direction, despite the fact that it looks like a kind of a ball of yarn. So you really do have, it's not quite linear, but it's not exactly free-flowing either. You can't encounter this or that part of the dungeon fluidly or dynamically, because the only way you can really get to it is to backtrack through a whole bunch of stuff you've already explored and take another route off some of the central branches.
This is sort of a modern game design thing that people really like that is absent here. It's called Gygax the Dungeon, after Janelle Gygax, early Judges Guild adventure writer, and later Doom level, or is it Quake? She's done an awful lot of work in FPS mapping. I think she was sort of the heroine of like Halo Wars, if anyone remembers that weird spin-off title. But yeah,
worth looking up.
She had a philosophy of making sure that every part of the dungeon was sort of interconnected, often by very convoluted methods, lots of verticality, lots of secret doors, but the point would be to create loops around the dungeon, so if someone's smart enough, they can loop right back around to another section of the dungeon, and that creates a better exploration flow.
Yeah.
However, Gygax seems, certainly in this example dungeon, I don't think Gygax has built with that in mind, and it is far more that if you were to bring this out, some sections would have these sort of loops, assuming you search for secret doors in certain corridors. But most of them, as you say, is these sort of linear sections with only one direction to approach them from, and therefore sort of more like each piece is its own cubbyhole with whatever denizens in there sort of isolated from the rest, which maybe to him made for a more easier to plan, easier to bring out, easier to customize maybe, easier to alter. He does not go into his dungeon design philosophy here, he merely presents the example.
He might have got the same result by rolling a dice. Just before we go on, can I mention a couple of other famous Doom map designers? One is Sandy Peterson, who I think is the same Sandy Peterson who did a bunch of work for early D&D, or was it?
And Call of Cthulhu?
And Call of Cthulhu, yeah, I think it's the same guy, I'm not sure. Met him once, and if he worked on Doom maps, he kept that under his hat. And another one is American McGee, who did original Doom levels for the original Doom, and then went on to make...
Last I heard of him, I think he was making games in China.
A lot of people making games in China. It's a big market.
True.
But yeah, and if you want to hear more about the development of Doom, I highly recommend Tim Rogers' 3-hour review of Doom. You can find it on YouTube. Just look for Tim Rogers Doom Action Button.
Is that Rogers with just a G or with a DG?
Rogers with the usual number of consonants. Did I say it funny? Like Mr. Rogers.
Okay.
Tim Rogers, cool guy. Anyways, so that's complete sequitur. But yeah, okay, we got this dungeon, and they only give you the first 3 rooms keyed.
Yeah, so 3 rooms are described. We won't dwell on the details because it sort of goes over it in the example of play, but it's basically one room, the entrance room full of things to poke at that have no value and one horrible monster. A sort of puzzle room where there's a secret treasure, but it's hard to get because it's hidden and also will flow away in the water. And a third room, which is the secret door behind which is half of the remaining dungeon, but also the horrible monsters inside. It's sort of got the sort of thinking cap mentality in mind, because it's very puzzle driven, but also filled with horrible peril. This is the example that Gygax is giving as essentially a starter dungeon, as far as I can tell. This is what he expects.
Right.
Yeah, the average first level party to be facing.
This is a horrible starter dungeon. Well, first of all, it's not. It's 3 rooms, which are just filled with dry geometry and some small puzzles and sort of incidents to go through. But he has in no way given the fledgling GM enough to go on. D&D got a lot better at this. Arguably, the box set starters now are some of the best dungeon starter kits you'll ever see for D&D. Although I'd argue that Tomb of the Serpent King is by far and away one of the best written primers on how to do dungeon. and it is written explicitly to teach GMs and players alike how dungeons work, and it's great.
I believe we have a previous episode titled Starter Dungeons.
Yeah, also I really like the first dungeon from Dragon Heist, primarily because it's got a secret door in it right at the start that will actually take you to the end of the dungeon and put you the wrong side of a boss encounter, which I just think is a wonderful... it's this weird spur in what's otherwise a perfectly conventional let's get you started. You can accidentally find yourself in a fight that you're very likely to... You run into a mind flayer on level 1 in this dungeon. That's crazy, and I love it. I think it's cool that D&D still has some of that sort of unfairness in it in the official product. But I digress yet again.
So we start with our after those 3 example rooms. We start with the first dungeon adventure, which is sort of setting up the background about this. Suppose that the example that is about to happen, although there's going to be an aside. Once again, we can't have the thing beside the thing it's clearly reference to. There has to be a whole bunch of asides first. We sort of sets up the background of that this is a abandoned monastery of some sort. That's in the middle of a swamp, because that's where people put monasteries apparently. 2 miles from town. And of course, the person who has brought you there to this dungeon to find treasure inside is actually a 3rd level thief who is going to mug them as soon as they get out of the dungeon.
Right. Ambitious.
Yeah, like as far as I know, there was no fatalities in the first dungeon encounter that he had for his kids when he first ran D&D. I think they just met some kobolds. Tensor, played by Ernest Gygax, cast sleep on them. They just stabbed them as they were sleeping and stole a chest full of copper pieces from them.
How noble.
I don't think it was quite the level of elaborate setup to have the player characters be screwed over that Gygax is, in this book, attempting to establish as absolutely normal and expected. And this is something that confuses me about stuff like Village of Hamlet. People say like stuff like Village of Hamlet is meant to be a perfect start dungeon, but it is full of absolute subversions of what we call fantasy tropes. Half the people in the starter inn, their next move is to trail the party. Like, the party does actually go to the dungeon. Like, they will probably have 15 people trailing behind them, ready to mug them as soon as they leave the dungeon. It's a bit excessive. But Gygax is apparently presenting it here as the expectation.
Okay, but Hamlet is kind of written in the sense that you can maybe pick and choose a couple of those, depending on how your characters or your players interact with the denizens of the village, and set them up as antagonists. You don't necessarily have to have all of them. It's a smorgasbord. You don't have to pick. You don't have to eat everything.
I guess.
But if on a straight read though, that is exactly how it reads. Like, okay, you're gonna get jumped by a small town as soon as you emerge, clutching emeralds and golden hafted shillelaghs. Right.
Yeah.
So, and in this case, you've even got as you say, the muggers at their back, so they'll be herded blinking at the sunlight, and then jumped by this 3rd level non-player character, who is possibly going to be outmatched by the time they get through a dungeon and pick up a couple of levels.
Considering how the rest of the example goes, I don't think there's going to be that many players left to resist them by the time they get back out.
Fair enough.
But we get through this sort of additional setup, which fair enough, and then it immediately starts going into stuff about maps and how, even though he only presented the dungeon map, the expectation is that the GM is going to have 3 maps.
Yeah.
A map of the town.
I'm looking at that and I started scrolling ahead to try and find them, and they don't exist. Are they in some sort of appendix?
Like, apparently there's going to be a map of the village and the several square miles, including the swamp and the dungeon. Then there's going to be the upper building, a map of the upper building in which you go down into this dungeon. And then there's the actual keyed and numbered dungeon map.
Did he just didn't put it in?
No, he didn't.
Was it not in that pile of papers he handed the editor, who clearly wasn't interested enough to edit this out and save Gary some blushes?
I do not think Gary was a prep light GM. That's not the impression that he has given me with these kinds of declarations. I think all of his complaints about, those ungrateful players ruining all my prep, I suspect he is one of those prep heavy guys who would have made 3 maps of the same dungeon unprompted and then complain when no one went to the dungeon.
Okay, look, there's a very good chance we're wrong. And I'm working off a PDF. The Warlord has an original copy, but there might be an insert that's missing. So if you do happen to have the other 2 maps mentioned here, get to our Discord. You can find the link in the show notes and show us what we're missing here. Give us context so we can apologize to the great guru Gygax. But let's plow on for now. Join our Discord.
But yeah, as I say, we're now just chunk into an aside, which is apparently this was the perfect place to put it, which is to start delineating the process of searching the dungeon.
Dungeon exploration. Okay, right. Yeah.
How long each mapping and searching section takes. And it is, as you'd imagine, horribly slow and deliberated.
How long can you torture your players with stupid questions about how far down a corridor they've moved? Which is kind of the worst form of exploration in dungeons. I've always liked the idea of the dungeon turn, this sort of 10 minutes of abstract searching and movement, but far too often it descends into I take a step forward. I take a step forward. Have I died yet? Have I detected anything? And
yeah, but the rate here has been suggested. Assuming you are a person of normal movement speed, you can map 10 times that movement in 10 minutes. So essentially it brings your per combat round movement down to a per minute movement if you're searching. And then there's sort of specific amounts for, are you searching a door for traps, or searching a 20 by 20 area of a room for traps, if you're specifically looking for secret doors. The difference between looking for secret doors by tapping versus thorough examination. Which ones take 1 round and which ones take an entire 10-minute section.
So I'm looking ahead, and immediately my eye goes to things like capital letters. And here in the detection of unusual circumstances, traps, and hearing noise, instantly I jump to, don't give players a free lunch, in all caps, regarding... What is this regarding? So secret doors, detecting stuff. A character with a sword must have it out and be thinking about its power in order for the weapon to communicate anything to him or her. To sum it all up, don't give players a free lunch. Tell them what they, quotation, see, allow them to draw their own conclusions and initiate whatever activity they desire. So you're free to fail. That's what that says.
Yeah. I really have to wonder how wildly successful Gygax's players were for him to feel forced into this sort of make sure that they are able to make mistakes mentality. Did his normal players really clock to all of his tricks so quickly that he had to start taking this? Maybe you would like to do something risky. Maybe you would like to have the chance of failure if I'm vague enough about how long this takes.
Maybe he was just no damn good at poker.
That's fun.
And this was his way of compensating. Like, you could just read Gary like a book.
Assume your players are continually wasting time if they are checking endlessly for traps and listening at every door.
Said the man who penned the Tomb of Horrors. Okay, Gary. Okay, Gary.
Why are you putting it all back on the players? Like, I know we sort of rag at Gary a lot in this, but like...
We go back and forth.
Yeah, 2-stroke engine and all that. But there's very little in terms of GMs having any responsibility for how the players are acting here. There's no sense at any time that how the GM is presenting information, or very little. Like, there may be 1 or 2 spaces where it's very briefly mentioned, but this section here is talking about how it's the player's fault if they're being super cautious and checking everything for 10 times for traps and all this rigmarole. It's like they're the ones who are dragging out this adventure. They're the ones who are turning this into this exciting fantasy adventure into boredom and dice rolling. And it's just like, there's no sense of here of, well, the GM is presenting a situation where they will die horribly if they don't do this. So maybe the GM needs to present their dungeon differently? Question mark? But no, there's none of that. And if there is it anywhere else, I have yet to come across it.
Yeah, it's... what can we say about that? He appears to want to have his cake and eat it. In terms of player, as you said, like how wildly successful were they that he felt like pushing back like this, and then having swung at them, how cautious did they become that he decides that caution should be penalised? I don't know, in terms of like what's the GM's responsibility in terms of player actions or inaction? I don't know. Does anyone want the game to happen? Maybe make that your priority. This is a pretty bad section. The other thing that caught my eye here was this paragraph here. It's a different one. It's about doors. It's about the difficulty of opening doors, for goodness sake. Doors. As a rule of thumb, all doors are hard to open and hard to keep closed or open, Schrodinger's door, for player characters, while inhabitants of the dungeon find little difficulty in these regards. Why? It's a door. Either it was a hard to open door or it's a hard to close door, but surely it can't be both at the same time. And especially depending on who's opening it. That doesn't make any sense, Gary. That's just being a dick.
Some people have sort of elaborated this quote into sort of imagining what they call the mythic underworld, where the dungeon is this living organism which has stuck doors all over the place, but opens the doors quietly for any sneaking monsters or what have you. But given the context of the rest of the text here, I think it's again more a case of making stuff easy for the GM and hard for the players.
In a really petty way. Like, doors. Come on. Okay, look, let's... we get to concealed doors, secret doors. It's a whole bunch... There's actually a sort of a scripted sequence regarding operation of secret doors, where you get an exchange between the DM and LC. LC being...
Oh no, this is where we're going back into the example of the map we have. We've gone straight from how to deal with secret doors straight into... Now we go back to the map we just drew out 2 pages ago.
Because this goes on for 1, 2, 3 pages in total.
Yeah.
Right. Which is... I mean, I've seen this device used in things like World of Darkness core books, where they'll give... Or Shadowrun's the other one, where they'll give a little back and forth. But this is a miniature play in the middle of...
Yeah, I do not think we should overly...
1 act, 2 players. I was going to suggest that we act it out, but it is 3 pages.
Yeah, there's a lot to it.
Can we do the first 3 backs and forth? So you're the DM, you do your 3.
Okay.
And I'll be LC, which is luckless chancer, I guess.
It's the leader character, I think, is
leader character, okay. Right, you're the DM.
What are you going to do now?
Light our torches and go down the steps.
Fine, but I'll need the marching order you'll be in. At this point, the players either write down the names of the characters, with each in respective rank, or place their painted miniature of characters in actual formation, as minimum width is 3.5 feet, 3 1/3 feet per character, a 5 foot wide corridor requires single file, a 10 foot wide passage means up to 3 abreast, or up to 6 abreast can move down a 20 foot wide passageway. Please note that what formation you take in a 5 foot wide passage, and what your marching order will be in a 20 foot wide area also.
After a brief discussion with the other players, here is the information on this sheet of notepaper. We'll change it only if one of us is wounded, lost, or killed.
Why are the gnome and the halfling in the front rank, the magic user in the middle, and the human fighter and cleric in the rear?
Well, very glad you asked me that. That way, all 5 of us can act when we encounter an enemy. The magic user can cast spells over the heads of the short characters in front, and the pair in the back rank can do likewise, or fire missiles, or whatever is needed, including a quick move to the front. Is that it? That's it. Let's stop there. Oh my god.
So, we run into quite immediately, we run into the first major problem with this entire example, which is that the example party are astoundingly terrible at this.
Not to mention, everyone sounds like what's Spock's race in Star Trek?
A Vulcan.
It sounds like Vulcans agreeing to have sex. It's like, yes, we will take this action now, and here are our reasons. Prepare yourself. What? No one talks like this, Gary.
But, like, it's amazing because this goes on for 3 pages. And it's every time there's any puzzle, the players will do the stupidest things. The horrible things will go wrong for them. And then they will roll like gods. All their saving throws when the spider jumps out of the rubbish they've dived into. They'll just manage to make all their poison saving throws. When they accidentally break the secret treasure in the water room, they'll just about manage to get the tube before it falls down to the pits of the earth. They will bumble around for most of a page or 2 as they examine the third room, only for out of nowhere someone to come up with the exact right answer. And it's all written in such a way as to make the dungeon itself seem smarter than them.
And I'm reading ahead here, and LC is a real armchair quarterback. Oh
yeah. Well, to be fair, this may be the idea that the Gygax had of the shot caller.
No, this guy's like, and this person will hand their torch to this person. It's like, that's just chill, man. You don't get to tell everybody at the table which hand their pockets in, or which pocket their hand's in. That's wild. All right, let's get past this bit.
Yeah, it all ends up with the gnome player in a startling burst of intelligence, breaking away from everything that the leader character is doing, solving the puzzle of the secret room, like that has stumped the party for an entire, probably half an hour of argument at this stage. He opens the secret door. He climbs into to show everyone what a good player he is, and he's immediately assaulted by half a dozen ghouls and torch shreds. No saving throw, no bother with any attack rolls. He's just eaten because he's a single gnome in front of 6 ghouls, and the GM thinks it's probably better to just kill him. It's quicker that way.
You've shown me up. Here's your reward. Very adversarial. Very, bad example of adversarial GMing. Do not like. Moving on. That's it then? Hold on. Then we get non-player characters. Wait, this is just... We're done. I hope you enjoyed this example. We're moving on to non-player characters.
What will the party do? Will the cleric realize that these are ghouls and he can attempt to turn them? Will he succeed at turning them? If not, there may well be no survivors. If so, what treasure lies beyond? Possibly the great gem talked about for one line in the previous section.
What motivation?
But the thief still awaits the party's return. And now that they have no gnome, they're helpless.
That's what that is. As these things go, now there are some classic starting example adventures and dungeons. The Haunted House, Call of Cthulhu, Lost Mines of Phandelver, very good. Even introduces the idea of talking to the monsters. This is not. That's not even the bottom of my barrel in terms of what is acceptable as an example. Man, they give out about the DMG these days. This is pretty bad. I don't like this at all. I think this is rubbish.
Well, we talked about non-player characters and their many perversions.
Let me see. It's a lot of charts. They like charts. I don't think we should. I think we should cap it here. It's a good length for an episode, and folks, go read it. It's a Beckett play in one act with 2 characters and all sorts of consequences. Judge it for yourselves and let us know what you think.
I'm not sure what's illustrated of, but it's definitely illustrated.
I'm not sure. Yeah, dysfunction, I think. The old maxim. I don't know what to make of that. Talk to your players. Maybe like they're adults. An extraordinary prolific use of the exclamation mark on the part of LC. Everything is an exclamation or a question. But honestly, I don't think I can throw any stones in that regard. Okay, I think we should leave it there for now, Warlord. What say you?
All right. I will finish off this cider made out of devil's bits.
Yeah, you should probably check the ingredient list.
That would probably ruin my fantasies.
Lithuanian beer hasn't killed me yet, is the thing they'll write on my tombstone.
Well, that just means you have to keep trying.
Keep trying, keep going, keep experimenting. Okay, that has been another tome of Gygax. We have looked, in probably more depth than I'm comfortable with, at what passes for a sample dungeon in the first edition of DMG. Myself, the Warlord, we are working our way through this legendary tome, picking out the obvious bright points of light in an otherwise dense and inky black stack of papers that were thrown at an editor sometime prior to 1979. Warlord?
We're approaching the midpoint of that, and at that point, that's where the appendices start.
Oh, wow.
Well, I think there's a magic item section between the middle of the book and the appendices, but once you get that, I think we'll probably be on the downwards. Well, we'll be able to freewheel from there.
Of course, because it's been so structured so far. Thanks for joining us again. I hope you're enjoying these rambling excursions into the mind of the Gygax. I don't know. We're kind of in discussion about whether we follow this up with an examination of another ancient classic, or maybe look at something more recent. We'd love to know your thoughts. Find us on Twitter, find us on Facebook, find us on our Discord, where we're hanging out every single day. Do you want to take us out?
If we could maybe make a YouTube video of showing all the wonderful art in the original Monster Manual, that would be, I think, an interesting follow-up to all of this.
No promises, but let's see what our great multimedia future brings us. But until now, I think it's time to mop up some of the blood in the smoking room and turn out the lights, which are made out of the skulls of your enemies.
Like everything else in this room.
Good night.
Thanks for listening to The Adventuring Party. You can find show notes and links to things we've mentioned at www.theadventuringparty.net and on our Facebook page. You can leave comments there, or talk to our Twitter account at AdventurePTY, or you can record a voice message at www.speakpipe.com/theadventuringparty. We can also be contacted directly by email at party@theadventuringparty.net. If you'd like to be in touch with the party all the time, come join our Discord server, link in the show notes. The Adventuring Party was released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share Alike version 3 license.